Negative stereotypes of the 16 personalities. Wow, this video could get me in some trouble. I use stereotypes a lot in my 16 personalities comedy sketches. You know, you've seen them. And of course, that's for comedic effect. You know, when things are kind of blown out of proportion, it's funny. We laugh. So I hope. But we are all individuals, right? And even if you have the same personality type as another person, you're not gonna be like the same exact person. And you might have the stereotype of your type and feel like, I don't relate to this. Why is this stereotype existing? I'm not like that. So in this video, I'm gonna talk about what I consider to be like a major negative stereotype of each type, and then talk about why that exists, like where it's coming from, but then also point out how you, if you are that type or someone you know who's that type, may not be like that at all. But everyone of that type is still kind of doing the same things. Their mind is working the same way that, if blown out of proportion, could end up as that stereotype. All right, let's jump into it. We'll start off with the extroverted thinkers, ESTJ and ENTJ, which have kind of similar stereotypes. For the ESTJ, the stereotype is they're mean. ENTJ, somewhat similar. It's like very calculating and, you know, ends justify the means. How do I get to that end result? I'll roll over anyone on my way there. So of course, you may meet some people like this, of this type, but there's gonna be a lot of people who don't fit this stereotype. So why does the stereotype exist? There are plenty of nice people who are ESTJ out there who would never be mean to you. Plenty of ENTJs who are great, friendly people, right? So it's not intrinsic to these personality types to be mean or to be ruthless. What it is the extroverted thinking. That decision-making process for any one of these types is, I need to make decisions based on what just works, what just gets me to the destination I'm trying to get to. What is the solution? So you can see how in an extreme that could lead someone to be mean or ruthless, because these types are not making decisions with the responsibility of making sure everyone feels good along the way. It's not that they don't care at all how people feel, it's just that they don't feel like that's the best way to make decisions. That doesn't make any sense. Why would you do it? It's not logical. Okay, let's move on to the extroverted feelers, the ESFJ and ENFJ. Now, unlike the extroverted thinkers, these types do feel the responsibility to make decisions based on what everyone else, you know, will feel good about. So for the ESFJ, one of the negative stereotypes about them is that they are gossips. They're just talking about everyone around them. Did you hear what Sally did? Did you hear about Timmy and all the things that are going on with him? Oh my gosh. I don't know, I went to cover my mouth, but I put it down here so it just looked weird. Like, I don't know. The ENFJs, one of their negative stereotypes is that they're not very intellectual. I mean, that goes back to they're making decisions based on feelings, so they're not doing much thinking. Both of these stereotypes have to do with having extroverted feeling as a dominant function. Extroverted feeling cares about what is important to other people, what is valuable to other people. It's a way of communicating like what is going on with everyone else. Gossip is just like an extreme version of that, just talking about other people and what they're doing. The thing about ESFJs is that they will always talk about other people. So you're not gonna find an ESFJ who just like never talks about other people, but the gossip thing don't necessarily have to go to that extreme, to be that negative, but you will usually hear ESFJs talking about, oh, what about so-and-so? Oh yeah, I like them, they're great, blah, blah, blah. And with the ENFJs, because they are NF types, they're going with the abstract stuff, so it's like all up in the air, and they're the feelers, so they have kind of this hippie vibe going on. That doesn't help them when it comes to the not intellectual stereotype. And they do have inferior introverted thinking, so it's like their internal logic process is going to be the thing that they struggle with the most in life. However, it's not uncommon to hear ENFJs who can just like come out with some well thought out stuff. The thing is, they feel responsible to make decisions with the extroverted feeling not with their introverted thinking. So yeah, they think things, they have an intellectual process going on, but they don't feel like that's the thing that they should be bringing out. All right, and while we're here, let's support this channel really quick and see if YouTube would like to show a commercial. Thanks for sitting through that, and if you're enjoying this video, hit the thumbs up button. Let's talk about the extroverted sensors, okay? The ESTP and ESFP. The ESTPs, man, they can be presented as kind of manipulative and selfish. The ESFPs can get a bad rap for being shallow. For both of these types, I think a lot of this comes from kind of a fast-moving nature. The extroverted sensing that they have as their dominant function is very much about gathering new things and new experiences and seeing what's out there. That's what they like. And the ESTPs are just kind of finding all these new experiences and new things and just doing what works for them. Whereas the ESFP, they're going around just looking for stuff that they like because they have introverted feeling. So it's all about, for both of these types, it's all about them, what they think works for the ESTP or what they like, what they think is good for the ESFP. That's why they can get this bad rap. If you really crank up the volume on those attributes, it can end up being selfish and manipulative or shallow. And while you will sort of see with these types that element of always wanting the new, wanting something more, wanting to keep gathering, it doesn't mean that all ESTPs are going to be that extreme of they'll do anything to get there, they'll manipulate you, they're selfish, they don't care about you. In fact, they often are pretty good at using their feeling function. Because with the EP types, they're fairly balanced with thinking and feeling. And ESFPs, yes, they do think about things in a deep way. The thing is, that's not what they're going to talk about, because that's not the most important thing. The most important thing is, what is the next new thing, right? It's that gathering. It's not necessarily stepping back to analyze. They can do it. They do it. It's just not that they do it. But when push comes to shove, rather than sitting back to continue to analyze what they already know, the information they already have, they would rather go out and find new. All right, next is the extroverted intuitives, the ENTP and the ENFP. And I think the ENTP, the whole big stereotype there is, you know, they're the debater, they're argumentative, they're combative, they're just a big jerk looking for an argument. I think what happens with ENTPs a lot of times is they just like to analyze arguments and find different ways of looking at it, and like, let's look at this hypothetically, let's, you know, theoretically, if this happened here. They don't do it to be combative. They do it just because it's a fun intellectual exercise. And so sometimes that comes across as being overly argumentative. But a lot of times I think ENTPs, as I said before, EPs have thinking and feeling pretty balanced. They have enough feeling there that they know, okay, I shouldn't go too hardcore with my arguing. ENFPs, they're big stereotype, which, you know, I'll be honest, in a lot of ways comes can be true, is that they are just like super disorganized, all over the place, scatterbrained even. That's because they are extroverted intuitives. They're always looking for new possibilities, and introverted sensing, which is about getting things organized, is their inferior function. It's the biggest problem in their lives. I think what it is that no ENFP likes to organize. They don't like to stop and do their chores. They don't like to get their house in order, to make a schedule, etc. But a lot of ENFPs have figured out, oh, if I do this, you know, if I just get stuff organized, you know, whatever, blah, 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 if I stick to a schedule, that allows me to just like do whatever the crap I want the rest of the time. Next, we move on to the introverted thinkers, the ISTP and INTP. ISTPs, the stereotype, I think, is that they are cold. They're like the lone cowboy out there. They're just cold. They don't feel nothing for nobody, and they're all on their own. They're loners. And with INTPs, I think one of the prevalent stereotypes is that they're kind of lazy. So with the ISTP, let's start with them, this idea that they don't have emotions or whatever. Actually, if you go back to my last video, the dark side of each of the 16 personalities, I do kind of talk about this. Neither of these types like to really engage emotionally. They don't like to talk about emotions. They don't like to listen to what other people are feeling. They don't like to make decisions based on emotions. For both of these types, they feel the responsibility to make decisions based on what they think is logical, what they think is going to work. Emotions of other people, we're not going to worry about that. So for the ISTPs, that can come across sometimes as being a bit cold because they're trying to avoid emotions. If other people start talking about their emotions, the ISTPs might get a little weird. But it's really only the extreme stereotype of an ISTP that's just like cold, stone cold Steve Austin all the time. Most ISTPs, while they do not like to talk about emotion, they can do it. They can listen to you talk a little bit about it. They can maybe occasionally express a little bit of emotion. They don't like to go there. They would prefer to get away from it, but they do have feelings. It's just not the thing that they feel responsible to spend their time talking about. Then the INTPs, they're lazy, man. This is kind of an interesting stereotype. Maybe it actually does have to do with the introverted thinking. I think these two types are very reclusive. They like to just sit and think for themselves. They don't need other people to talk to about what they're thinking about, which can make them appear perhaps lazy because they need a lot of time to just figure things out in their brain. They will keep to themselves a lot. And with the INTPs, because they are intuitive, they are a little bit more out of touch with reality. And so going outside, doing stuff like physical labor is not perhaps their strong suit. But the INTPs, especially when they find something they want to work towards, they will work very hard towards it. But I think there is a lot of lead time where they got to think about it first. They got to figure it all out. All right, let's stop momentarily and see if YouTube would like to show yet another commercial. Thanks for sitting through that. Next, let's move on to the ISFP and the INFP, the introverted feeling types. The ISFPs, I think, get a bad rap, a stereotype, for being flaky, for being the kind of friend where you're like, hey, let's meet up and do this thing. And they'll be like, sure, I'll be there. And then they don't show up. They're like, oh, sorry, something came up, blah, blah, blah. I had to do whatever. They kind of just want to do their own thing. They follow their own heart. You know, I've talked about this in past videos that the introverted feelers, that's what they're all about, following their own heart. What do they think is good? What do they value? What do they think is important? And that can lead them maybe to flake out on you, to say, oh yeah, that sounds like a good idea. I'll do that. I'll be there. And then they find something that they would rather do, especially ISFP, you know, they have the extroverted sensing where it's like new experiences, new things come up. They don't like to make plans necessarily. And with the INFPs, I think this stereotype, perhaps you can anticipate this coming, is that they're depressed and they're sad. I actually made a whole video about this one stereotype. With introverted feeling, that's, you know, emotions that are very deep and hard to move. So if an INFP happens to get sad, it's hard for them to get out of it, and it's hard for other people to get them out of it. So yeah, INFPs, when they get depressed, can be pretty depressed. But yeah, with the ISFPs, they're not necessarily flaky. What is going on is just that they like to do what they like to do. And I think that a lot of the times, if they say they will do something, it's because they want to do it. I think the stereotype comes up when you get an ISFP who is like really selfish, kind of like an extreme, where they just don't want to say anything to upset anyone, so they just agree to do all these things with no intention to ever do it. And yes, while INFPs can get depressed, I think they are not necessarily more depressed than any other type, and you'll find tons of INFPs who are doing fine. They're happy, they're living life, doing their thing. Now let's move on to the ISTJ and ISFJ, the introverted sensing types. For the ISTJ, I think their stereotype is that they're boring, man. And I'll be honest with you, sometimes I lean hard into that stereotype when I'm making the comedy sketches, you know? Because introverted sensing is about keeping things in order, and extroverted thinking is about just like getting results and doing the logical things. So yeah, you can see how an ISTJ in the extreme circumstance would be a very boring person. With the ISTJs, they like to go out, they like to have fun, they like to think about new things and, you know, let loose and whatever. But the ultimate responsibility for them, at the end of the day, they know they have to have the facts straight. They know that they have to have their stuff in order, and that when they're making decisions, ultimately, even if there are things that they like and think are good, they have to make their decisions based on what is logical. So yes, in the extreme, that can make them very boring, but there is a lot more to your typical ISTJ. With the ISFJ, I think the stereotype is that they are overly attached to tradition. Like they're just stuck in the past. They're stuck in their ways. Because yeah, introverted sensing likes to get things organized in the sensory, which oftentimes would imply, let's do what we've done before. We know that this has worked in the past, so let's keep doing that. But ISFJs can change. They can do things differently. The thing is, it just takes them a little bit longer to adapt than maybe an ENFP, for example. It's really only the extreme stereotype of an ISFJ that'll be totally stuck in their ways and totally attached to tradition. Okay, now we come to the INTJ and the INFJ and their stereotypes. For the INTJ, I think the stereotype is that they are robots. They are like emotionless, just going about what is the most efficient thing I can do. And with the INFJ, I think the stereotype's kind of the opposite of it, that they're super sensitive, that they can't handle criticism. I've read this in a ton of places on the internet, that INFJs are like super sensitive to criticism. Now with the INTJ, yeah, they are very efficiency oriented. Introverted intuition plus extroverted thinking, when you put those things together and put them on steroids, yes, that is like a robot, just like trying to get to, trying to do its thing as efficiently as possible. But when you get to know INTJs, they have a lot of feeling there too. It's just not the thing that they usually present to you first. INTJs really like to nerd out over stuff. They really get into their interests and they like to talk about it too once they get to know you. So then when we get to the INFJ, this whole thing about being overly sensitive, you know, that's where like stuff like the INFJ door slam comes from. And to be honest with you, it's tough for me to come up with a logical explanation for the origin of these stereotypes of the INFJ being overly sensitive to criticism. Perhaps it has to do with extroverted feeling and, you know, needing approval and validation from other people. And it's true, INFJs are looking for validation from others, and criticism will deflate them. I mean, I think it will deflate anyone. But like I talked about before with some of the EP types, IJs also have thinking and feeling relatively balanced. And so when an INFJ receives criticism, it might sting. Yeah, they might not like it, but I think they are more able to process it. INFJs are good at seeing both sides of things. They're able to handle it, and maybe, yeah, in an extreme, they will be overly sensitive, they will hold on to it, they will be angry about it, but I think most INFJs, when they get criticized, learn how to incorporate the criticism, learn how to see the value in it, and then use it for their own good. Thanks for watching. If you want to watch another video, click right here or watch the whole playlist right here. And until next time, stay cool and attractive.